They say when your world collapses, it doesn't always come crashing down in a single moment. It unravels, quietly, like a thread slipping loose until you look up one day and realize you're holding nothing. That was me. On a cold February morning, standing in the kitchen of a house I built with my own hands, holding my daughter in one arm and the last pieces of my marriage in the other. And I had no idea yet how far it had already crumbled. My name is Daniel Myers. I'm 35 now, but this story started 2 years ago in a suburb outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. I grew up about 3 hours away in a blue-collar town where you learned early how to swing a hammer or fix a truck. My dad was a mechanic, my mom a cashier at the same grocery store for over 2 decades. We didn't have much, but we had pride. Pride in doing things the right way. Pride in keeping promises. I carried that pride into adulthood. I didn't have a fancy degree or a trust fund, but I had a strong back and a willingness to outwork anyone. By 28, I'd moved up from construction grunt to foreman. By 31, I'd started my own renovation company. And by 33, I had 3 crews, a fleet of trucks, and a waiting list 6 months long. I didn't inherit anything. I earned it day by day, job by job. It was at a housewarming party hosted by one of my clients where I met her, Madison. She had a camera slung over one shoulder and confidence in her walk that turned heads. She was a freelance brand consultant, whatever that meant exactly, with bright amber eyes and a laugh that drew people in. She told me I was unexpectedly magnetic for a guy who smelled like drywall dust. I told her she was trouble. We both were right. We dated for almost 2 years before getting married. The wedding was small, her idea. Intimate, she called it, though she later griped that it didn't have a drone videographer or a champagne wall like her college friends' weddings. Still, those early days were good, simple. We'd cook together, binge watch crime documentaries, and plan out a future that felt exciting and real. About a year into marriage, Madison found out she was pregnant. It wasn't planned, but we were both overjoyed. She wanted to stay home during the early years, and I was in a place financially to support that. I had just finished renovating a 3-bedroom ranch-style home outside Monroe, bought it with savings from a profitable flip and a lot of elbow grease. We painted the nursery together. Pale mint walls, little clouds above the crib. I can still remember how her eyes lit up when she saw the room finished. When our daughter Ava was born, Madison struggled. There were long nights and tears. I took 3 weeks off to help even though I knew it would cost me work. I handled the feedings, the appointments, the diaper blowouts, everything. I hired a part-time nanny so Madison could get breaks. I cooked, cleaned, worked 12-hour shifts and still came home with enough left to care for both of them. I thought that's what love looked like: sacrifice, support, showing up. But slowly, I noticed things shifting. Madison seemed distant. She spent more and more time on her phone, scrolling through Instagram, watching reels of moms in Bali and couples on yachts. She started comparing our lives to people we didn't even know, criticizing our home, our routine, our reality. "Don't you ever feel like we're just surviving?" she once asked, her tone casual, but her eyes accusing. I didn't know how to respond. I thought surviving together was part of building something lasting. I didn't realize then that she was already detaching, crafting a narrative where I was the weight holding her back, instead of the man holding everything together. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Wednesday. Rainy. I'd been out since 5:30 a.m., trying to solve a supply issue on a project in Matthews. I remember coming home late, boots caked in mud, shoulders sore, only to find Ava still in her high chair, her dinner half-eaten, Madison at the kitchen island with her laptop and a glass of wine. She didn't even look up. "I need a break," she said flatly. Not from her work, she didn't have any, but from me, from us. I remember freezing, still halfway through taking off my jacket. "A break?" I asked, more confused than angry. "Like, a trip?" "No, Daniel, a break. From this marriage. From being a wife and a mom, I've lost myself. She said it like she'd rehearsed it, like the words weren't even hers. I looked at her, really looked, and realized I didn't recognize her anymore. She wore silk pajamas and had her nails freshly done. Meanwhile, I had calluses on my hands and a toolbox still in the truck from a job I rushed to finish to make it home in time. I asked the question that had been clawing at the back of my mind for weeks. Is there someone else? She flinched. Just for a second, barely noticeable. But I saw it. I always see those details. You can't run a successful build without knowing how to read the room, the client, the budget. And now I was reading my wife, and I didn't like what I saw. No, she replied, her voice suddenly sharp. Don't turn this into some misogynistic witch hunt. Just because I want more doesn't mean I'm cheating. I didn't believe her. Not fully. But I also didn't want to believe she'd do that. Not Madison. Not the woman who once cried when I surprised her with Ava's first pair of baby shoes. Not the woman who swore she wanted forever with me. But she was already gone. I just hadn't realized it yet. The next few days felt like walking through fog. Madison moved around the house like a guest, always dressed up but never going anywhere specific. She claimed she was doing self-care or reconnecting with herself. Meanwhile, I was the one getting up early with Ava, packing her bag for my mom's place, heading to job sites, fielding calls, and returning home after dark to find Madison on the couch, laughing at her phone. I knew something was off. You don't just fall out of love overnight. You drift. You detach. You look for something to replace what used to feel like home. I just didn't know that replacement had a name. It was my best friend's girlfriend, Lydia, who finally confirmed what I already suspected. She and Madison were in the same online book club. Book club turned out to be a chat server where the main activity wasn't discussing novels. It was venting about husbands and flirting with strangers. Lydia had noticed Madison talking nonstop to someone named Noah, a guy she met through some obscure creative writing channel. He's different, Madison wrote in one message. He listens. He's deep. He's not obsessed with money or work or status like Daniel. The words hit me like a punch to the ribs. After everything I'd done, building our life, supporting her through pregnancy, holding it all together, this is how she saw me. But it got worse. Screenshots showed late-night messages, intimate ones, messages filled with words she never used with me anymore. She told him she felt truly seen for the first time in years. She said I was dull, predictable, and emotionally sterile. The man she was sharing her soul and body with lived in another state, hadn't held a job in years, and still lived with his parents at 30. And yet, she was enamored, planning to visit him, discussing custody and alimony like it was all just part of a new chapter in her story. Like Ava was a suitcase to be packed. Like I was just an obstacle she had to handle. I didn't confront her immediately. I couldn't. I was too numb. Instead, I did what I always did when life punched me in the gut. I made a plan. First, I documented everything. I copied messages, gathered financial records, and took detailed notes on how often Madison actually engaged with Ava. She'd started sleeping in late, barely lifting a finger around the house, disappearing for hours with vague explanations, and ignoring our daughter in favor of her glowing screen. I installed security cameras in common areas. Legal, since I owned the house outright. Madison barely noticed, too busy texting in corners and FaceTiming in the bathroom. Then I met with a lawyer, a woman named Camille who didn't sugarcoat anything. You need to think about your daughter, she said. Madison has already left this marriage emotionally. You have to prepare for when she leaves physically and tries to take Ava with her. That hit me harder than anything. Losing Madison? I could handle that. But Ava? The thought of losing mornings filled with giggles and bedtime stories about princesses and dragons? That tore something open in me. So I shifted. I scaled back my work hours, delegated more to my foreman. I made Ava my anchor. I took her to doctor appointments, packed her lunches, read her books, taught her to build forts in the living room. I wanted her to know, no matter what happened, she'd always have one parent who showed up. Meanwhile, Madison seemed to be living in a different reality. One night, she handed me a list of things she needed done around the house: laundry, meal prep, car maintenance, all while claiming she was too emotionally depleted to function. Another time, she accused me of being cold and distant when I refused to make her a smoothie after working a 12-hour day and bathing Ava. She talked endlessly about her life coach, a woman she'd found through the same online group. This so-called coach charged $250 an hour and told Madison she needed to release herself from roles that no longer served her. In other words, being a wife and mother. I found Madison's journal one evening, left open on the kitchen table. I didn't go looking for it, but when I saw the heading Ideal Partner versus Current Reality, I froze. Ideal: emotionally intelligent, romantic, artistic, supportive of self-growth, spiritually awakened. Reality: practical, rigid, emotionally stunted, financially driven, lacks depth. It was like reading a eulogy for a version of me that only existed in her mind. I wasn't angry. I was heartbroken. I had worked so hard, tried so hard, loved so hard, but none of it mattered. Not to her. Not anymore. She came home late one night, claiming she'd been out with friends, but her shared location showed she sat in a grocery store parking lot for hours, probably FaceTiming Noah, whispering dreams into a phone screen. I looked at my daughter sleeping peacefully and knew this couldn't go on. Madison wasn't just leaving me. She was abandoning our family one breadcrumb at a time. And if I didn't act soon, I'd lose the one thing that still mattered: Ava. I stopped hoping Madison would come back to me, not because I didn't love her anymore, but because I finally understood that the person I loved didn't exist in this version of her. I had to let that go. And once I did, I stopped reacting. I started responding. When she'd criticized me for being too structured, I didn't argue. When she rolled her eyes as I helped Ava build a pillow castle, I didn't flinch. When she made snide comments about how masculine energy like mine was oppressive to her inner growth, I just nodded and moved on. I was no longer trying to save the marriage. I was trying to save my daughter's world. I kept documenting everything: the missed meals, the constant screen time, the nights she'd fall asleep on the couch in her robe with a wine glass and her phone open to Noah's messages. I collected it all, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed protection. For me, for Ava. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone in the laundry room, whispering. Her voice had that mix of excitement and entitlement I'd grown to dread. "He has no idea," she said. "Still sleeping in the guest room like a loyal little puppy. I'm giving it a few more weeks. Once I've sorted the money stuff and figured out how to get Ava to Oregon without drama, I'm gone." That was it. The final nail. I contacted Camille again, and we put the legal wheels in motion. Divorce filings, petition for primary custody, a comprehensive packet of evidence that painted the full picture: a mother emotionally checked out, prioritizing a virtual affair over her child's needs. We gathered proof of her financial dependence, her neglect, her verbal abuse masked as self-care rhetoric. We even submitted receipts for her coaching sessions, spa visits, and shopping binges, all paid for with my income while she claimed she felt trapped. But I didn't stop there. I started therapy. Not for her, not even for Ava, at least not directly, but for me. I needed to untangle the mess in my head, needed someone outside the chaos to help me sort through it. My therapist, Dr. Beck, was sharp, honest, and unapologetically grounded. He didn't let me wallow in self-pity. He asked hard questions. Why did I allow myself to carry the emotional weight of two people for so long? Why did I accept being dismissed, mocked, minimized in my own home? It was painful, but freeing. Meanwhile, Madison continued living in delusion. She believed she was the protagonist of a rom-com, bravely breaking free from the prison of domesticity, with Noah as her poetic savior. She bragged to her friends, those who still talked to her, that she was about to reinvent herself. I played the role of the uninspired ex with precision. I didn't challenge her. I didn't expose her. I let her become the person she thought I was, cold, distant, distracted, while I quietly worked on the only thing that mattered, Ava's stability. One Saturday morning, Madison handed me a new co-parenting schedule she had downloaded from some influencer's blog. It gave her 5 days a week, with me getting weekends and holidays. I didn't react. I just said, "Let's see what the court decides." She laughed, almost condescendingly. No judge is going to side with a workaholic father over a mother. She didn't know how wrong she was. A few weeks later, we stood before a family court judge. My attorney laid out everything: documents, photos, logs, footage. There were images of Ava crying alone while Madison FaceTimed with Noah in the kitchen, screenshots of their explicit chats, including conversations about uprooting Ava's life for a man she'd never met. When Madison took the stand, she tried to perform. Tears, victimhood, buzzwords. She talked about spiritual healing, postpartum burnout, emotional neglect. But it fell apart when she couldn't answer simple questions about Ava's last doctor visit or who her pediatrician even was. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He spoke with clarity that cut sharper than anger. "This court prioritizes the well-being of the child, Ms. Myers," he said. "And what I see is a father providing consistency, structure, and emotional support. What I see from you is instability, entitlement, and disregard for parental responsibility." Madison was granted supervised visitation, no alimony, child support to be calculated once she found employment. The house remained mine. Ava remained with me. I should have felt triumphant, victorious. But all I felt was empty, because I hadn't won anything. I had survived something that should never have happened in the first place. The day Madison moved out was gray and windless, like the world itself was holding its breath. She stood in the doorway with 2 suitcases and a vacant expression while her parents helped carry down boxes. Ava clung to my leg, not fully understanding, but sensing enough. Madison didn't kneel down to say goodbye. She just waved and said she'd see her next week. I closed the door behind her and sank onto the living room couch, Ava in my lap, silence wrapping around us both. It was over. Not the heartbreak. Heartbreak is sneaky, it lingers. But the chaos, the pretending, the endless waiting for her to be someone she never was, that part, at least, was done. Over the next few months, the dust settled. Ava adjusted better than I could have hoped. Kids are resilient, but only when they feel safe. And I made sure she did. I structured her days around joy. Mornings with stories and cereal, afternoons with backyard treasure hunts, evenings with bubble baths and bedtime songs. I let her paint on the walls in the garage, turned our old office into a playroom, and rebuilt my world around her smile. I went back to work slowly. My foreman, Ray, stepped up big time. I made him a partner, something I'd been planning for a while, and took on fewer projects so I could be present, really present, not just physically home, but emotionally anchored. I wasn't just building houses anymore. I was building something deeper: peace, stability, the kind of life Ava would grow up remembering as warm and whole. Madison, meanwhile, tried to spin her own new beginning, but without a support system or income, reality hit her hard. Noah ghosted her the week after she moved out. No money, no home, no child to bring with her. He'd gotten what he wanted and disappeared. Her Discord support group faded too. They were never really friends, just a chorus that validated her fantasies. Now that she needed real help, they were silent. She moved into a small apartment her parents co-signed for, picked up part-time retail work, and started going to therapy. I wanted to be bitter. Some days I still was. But I kept reminding myself, Ava didn't need a father obsessed with vengeance. She needed a father who knew when to put down his pride. When Madison called months later, her voice was unrecognizable, smaller, shaky. She cried, told me she'd made the biggest mistake of her life, that she missed Ava, missed me, that she'd been sick in the head, caught in a fog. She begged for a second chance, for our family. And for a brief, quiet moment, I remembered the woman I once loved. I remembered painting the nursery together, laughing over cheap pizza on the kitchen floor before the cabinets were installed. I remembered the nights we danced barefoot in the living room after Ava fell asleep. But memory is not truth. It's a softened version, a filtered one. The truth was, she'd tried to use me. She'd planned to take our daughter away, mock me behind my back, and then stand in court with crocodile tears. And now that her fantasy had crumbled, she wanted a reset. I told her no, not out of anger, but because some lines once crossed can't be uncrossed. Trust wasn't a switch, it was a structure, and hers had collapsed. I helped her, though. I gave her contacts for job placement services. I offered to help with therapy resources, even found a support group for mothers recovering from emotional crises. I did all of that not for her, but for Ava, because Ava still needed a mother, even if that mother was no longer my partner. I kept the visitation supervised just as the court required. Madison showed up, sometimes late, sometimes withdrawn. But she showed up. That was a start. Months passed. Life became quieter, not easier, but clearer. And then something unexpected happened. At one of Ava's checkups, I met someone. Her name was Claire. She was the pediatric nurse that day, and we struck up small talk about Ava's drawings. She laughed at my lame dad jokes, and later, we bumped into each other at the hardware store. She asked about a stain color. I asked if she liked coffee. And somehow, that turned into a date. Claire didn't ask me to change. She didn't compare me to filtered Instagram dads or poets in basements. She liked that I fixed things, that I cooked, that I showed up on time, that I cared more about bedtime than Bitcoin. She liked the calluses on my hands and the stories behind my scars. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. We took things slow. I didn't want another rush. No more illusions. But with her, things felt grounded, easy, real. Ava adored her, and Claire adored Ava. She taught her how to braid friendship bracelets and bake blueberry muffins. She asked about her favorite bedtime story and remembered the names of Ava's stuffed animals, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And one night, while we were sitting on the back porch watching Ava chase fireflies, Claire turned to me and said, "I don't know what kind of man let someone like you slip through his fingers, but I'm grateful he did." I looked at Ava, then at Claire, and I finally understood what peace felt like. Not perfect, not painless, but whole. Madison still calls sometimes, updates about work, occasionally apologizes again. I listen. I'm kind, but I don't invite the past back in. We are civil, co-parents, nothing more. She understands that now. The wall is permanent. And me? I wake up every morning to a house filled with little shoes and crayon drawings. I pour coffee while Ava sings to her cereal. I fix broken hinges and build fairy houses and teach her how to plant tomatoes. I go to sleep tired, but never empty. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't rage or payback. It's healing. It's peace. It's building a life so solid, so full, that those who tried to tear you down can only stand at a distance and wonder how you're still standing. But you're not just standing, you're thriving.